The silent invasion, hook and suspense. The galaxy was a vast, peaceful expanse where the different species lived, traded, and fought in their own corners of space. They had their alliances, their battles, and their leaders who commanded respect. The distant corners of the galaxy were untouched by the conflicts that had shaped much of the known universe. That was until humans appeared. No one saw it coming. One day, reports began flooding in from far-off systems, strange ships in the sky, dark, sleek, and unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These ships didn't broadcast any communications. They didn't send any messages of peace or warning. They simply appeared, and no one knew who or what was inside. The first fleet to encounter them was a group of alien warships from the Talrax Empire. They were strong, aggressive, and had defeated many of their enemies in the past. But this time was different. When they came face to face with the human ships, they didn't know what hit them. The human fleet didn't fire warning shots. They didn't negotiate. They didn't even try to communicate. In a matter of hours, the Talrax fleet was gone. No one knew what happened, not at first. There was no debris left behind, no signs of what had happened. Just the sudden silence of the fleet's disappearance. Only one ship managed to escape, and it was in complete disarray. Its crew was shaken, some injured, some missing, but all terrified. The ship's captain, a veteran of many wars, had no words to explain the events that took place. All he could say was that the humans were not like any species they had ever encountered. And then, as quickly as they came, the human ships vanished into the depths of space, leaving no trace of their presence. No one knew where they went or if they would return. Rumors began spreading across the galaxy. The galaxy was filled with whispers. The humans don't take prisoners. They destroy their enemies completely. If you face them, you never survive. The stories were unlike anything the galaxy had heard before. And soon, the fear began to spread. No one knew the truth. No one knew who the humans were or what they wanted. But one thing was clear. These humans had a new way of doing things, a way that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. As the reports from the Talrax Empire and other witnesses filtered in, many began to realize that something far greater was at play. The humans weren't here to make alliances. They weren't interested in trading or diplomacy. The silence of their invasion was unsettling. There were no warnings, no terms, no declarations, just sudden, overwhelming power. The galaxy's leaders, generals, and strategists all struggled to make sense of what had happened. How could a species so unknown, so small, bring about such devastation? How could they move through space unnoticed, and yet leave such a trail of destruction behind? The question that haunted the galaxy's rulers was simple. Why didn't they take prisoners? Every alien force that had encountered the humans shared the same story. There were no survivors, and those who tried to fight were simply erased. The galaxy's oldest species, the ones who had been around for centuries, had never seen anything like it. As time passed, reports continued to emerge. One by one, more and more alien fleets faced off with the humans, only to meet the same grim fate. The galaxy was starting to understand. These humans didn't follow the rules. They didn't play by anyone's standards. And that was the problem. The galaxy had long known peace, had long known the rules of war. You fought, you captured prisoners, you took land. Even in the worst wars, there were survivors. But the humans didn't care for these rules. To them, every enemy was an enemy that had to be destroyed completely. And that's when the fear really set in. No one knew how to stop them. No one knew why they fought with such a brutal efficiency. But every species that had faced the humans knew one thing for certain. If you stood against them, there was no hope. You wouldn't be taken prisoner. You wouldn't have a second chance. The silence of the human invasion wasn't just eerie. It was a warning. And now, the entire galaxy had to face the fact that there was a new player in the universe, one that didn't show mercy, one that didn't follow the old ways of war. As the rumors continued to spread, the galaxy's most powerful forces came together. They tried to form alliances, to find ways to defeat the humans, but each attempt failed. Each time, the humans showed up, and each time, they wiped their enemies from existence. The galaxy was learning something it hadn't known before: fear. The real question now was not whether the humans would return. The question was, what would they do next, and who would be next in line to face their terrifying power? The silent invasion had only just begun, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming next. The first encounter. The galaxy had barely begun to recover from the shock of humanity's silent invasion when the first true confrontation happened. After the Talrax fleet was wiped out without a trace, the galaxy's leaders feared the worst. Whispers of the humans' power spread like wildfire, and the fear that these strange beings would continue to obliterate everything in their path grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't long before another enemy made the decision to stand against the humans: the Coral Empire. A mighty force known for its vast fleets and strong military tactics was unwilling to be intimidated. They had defeated enemies far greater than themselves, and their pride wouldn't allow them to simply hide and wait for the humans to come to them. They would take action. The coral ships, sleek and heavily armed, gathered in the outer rim of their territory, preparing for what they believed would be an epic battle. They thought themselves prepared for anything. Their intelligence reports had told them little about the humans, but they knew the power of their ships, the strength of their fleet. If anyone could stand against an unknown force, it was them. On the day of the encounter, the Coral fleet moved out in full force, ready for war. Their commanders issued orders with confidence, certain they could defeat whatever threat lay ahead. They had underestimated the human force, and they would soon learn why. Without warning, the human fleet appeared on the outskirts of Coral space, moving in a formation that seemed disorganized at first. The Coral commanders laughed at the sight. They assumed this was a tactic, a trick to make them hesitate. But they were wrong. The human ships weren't there to intimidate. They weren't there to negotiate. They weren't there to do anything but destroy. The Coral fleet moved to engage, firing their weapons and launching their advanced drones. The humans, however, didn't react as expected. They didn't waste time firing back with every weapon at their disposal. Instead, their ships moved with an efficiency that left the Coral fleet in disarray. The human fleet didn't care about showy displays of power or grand battles. They simply wanted to win. The first strike came so swiftly that the Coral commanders barely had time to react. Their ships were hit with precision, their shields failing before they even had a chance to raise them. One by one, their ships were taken out, not with random shots, but with surgical precision. The Coral ships never had a chance to retaliate. It was as though the humans knew their every move before they made it. And there were no survivors. The Coral fleet was destroyed in mere hours. There were no prisoners taken, no attempts at negotiation. The survivors from the Talrax encounter had been lucky, but not this time. The humans' message was clear. Those who fought them would be wiped out, completely and utterly. Their enemies would not escape. No mercy, no quarter. By the time the Coral Empire received word of their fleet's destruction, panic had set in. They couldn't understand how the humans had done it. How could they, with such small numbers and such strange technology, overpower a fleet that was built for dominance? It wasn't just the loss of ships that terrified them. It was the brutal finality of it. Every alien force that had faced the humans had simply ceased to exist. The Coral leaders were left with nothing but questions. Why didn't the humans take prisoners? Why didn't they leave anyone alive to question their motives? It didn't make sense. It wasn't the way war had ever been fought before. Rumors began circulating again, growing even more intense. The humans, they don't take prisoners, was whispered among the stars. They don't leave survivors. And it was then that the galaxy began to understand the true horror of what the humans had done. They weren't just strong. They were a force of nature, unstoppable, and relentless. The first encounter with the humans had proven something no one had ever expected. These beings were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They didn't follow the old rules. They didn't care about the conventions of war, about capturing enemies or taking prisoners. To them, an enemy was either destroyed or forgotten. And so, as the Coral Empire grieved their losses, the galaxy braced itself for the next encounter. No one knew when or where it would come from, but everyone knew one thing for certain. No one was safe. The humans had made that abundantly clear. The galaxy was learning something crucial. If the humans came to you, you didn't just fight for survival. You fought to the death. And even then, survival wasn't guaranteed. The question now was, who would be next? And what would the humans do when they arrived? Whispers of fear. The defeat of the Coral Empire was just the beginning. As the galaxy processed the devastating news, fear began to grow, and it spread faster than anyone could have imagined. The terrifying truth was beginning to sink in. The humans weren't like any other species the galaxy had encountered. They were ruthless, efficient, and had no interest in playing by the rules of war that governed the universe. Across various star systems, from the sleek and proud Phyrexian Union to the ancient, wise Selgar clans, rumors spread like wildfire. Every race had heard the stories of the human fleet, how they destroyed entire armadas in hours, how they left no survivors, how they didn't take prisoners. It was unimaginable. How could a race so young, so small in number, wield such terrifying power? For centuries, the galaxy had known a certain order. Wars were fought, yes, but in the end, there was always a possibility of negotiation. Prisoners were taken, treaties were signed, and survivors lived to tell the tale. But the humans weren't following the rules, and that was what terrified everyone. On the planet of Aetheris, in a quiet corner of the galaxy, the Council of Species gathered to discuss the growing threat. It was a council that included representatives from all the major races, beings who had lived through wars and conflicts that spanned centuries. But as the reports came in from their spies, the fear in their eyes was palpable. None of them had answers. "I've heard it from the Talrak survivors," said General Vorlak, a seasoned warrior from the Kralos Dominion, his voice shaky. "They say the humans don't take prisoners. Their ships, when they arrive, it's as though they know everything about you. Every move you make, every weakness, before you even think to act. And they don't hesitate. They just destroy." There was a long silence in the council room. The other leaders exchanged uneasy glances. No one had ever heard of such a thing. It was one thing to defeat an enemy. It was another entirely to obliterate them without leaving a trace. But that was what the humans had done, and it was what they would likely continue to do. "I've spoken with Selgar," said Councillor Salas, an elderly, wise representative from the ancient Selgar clans. "They claim the humans are unlike anything we've ever faced, not just in terms of strength, but in their complete disregard for mercy. A species that will not hesitate to destroy you, even if you beg for your life. There are no survivors." The room went quiet again. The thought of such brutality was almost too much to comprehend. The old way of doing things had always been to fight and then negotiate. But the humans weren't interested in negotiation. They had no interest in prisoners. They were here to win. And if you weren't willing to surrender, you were simply wiped out. "And they're not stopping," Salas continued. "I've heard whispers of human fleets moving through other sectors, crushing everything in their path. They are a force of nature, a force that doesn't care who you are or what you've done. They come, and they destroy." More whispers filled the room. Fear and uncertainty spread like a disease among the council members. If even the most powerful empires in the galaxy couldn't defend against the humans, what hope did the rest of the galaxy have? The council was faced with a difficult decision. Could they form an alliance? Could they stop the human invasion before it was too late? Or were they already too late? The biggest question of all haunted every leader in the room. Why didn't the humans take prisoners? The galaxy had always known that war meant casualties, but the idea of complete and utter destruction of the enemy was alien. No one had ever seen a species that didn't believe in mercy, in sparing even one life. It was as though the humans had no concept of the mercy that existed in other species. Fear quickly turned into paranoia. Reports of human sightings on the fringes of other star systems spread, and every new encounter only deepened the uncertainty. Ships that tried to engage the humans disappeared without a trace. No messages, no survivors, just silence. And that silence grew louder and louder with each passing day. One by one, the smaller empires and colonies began to fall. The survivors were few and far between, and those who lived to tell the tale spoke of the same chilling truth. The humans had come, and they didn't leave anyone alive. They left only ruin in their wake. It became clear to the galaxy's leaders. The humans were not only a threat to be defeated, they were a new type of enemy. One that didn't play by the rules, didn't care for diplomacy or peace talks. They didn't negotiate. They didn't even leave survivors. The galaxy was no longer just afraid of the humans' power. They feared the very idea of a species that could destroy everything in their path without hesitation. And as the fear spread, so did the realization. There was no escape. You couldn't run. You couldn't hide. If the humans came, your fate was sealed. And so, across the galaxy, alliances were formed, plans were drawn, and the galaxy's greatest military minds came together. But deep down, they all knew the truth. There was no way to stop the humans. And if they didn't learn that soon, they would all face the same fate as the Taurax and the Coral, wiped from the galaxy, with no one left to remember their names. The fear was only growing, and soon, the galaxy would understand that facing humans meant facing annihilation, a galaxy united in fear. The galaxy had never been this afraid. It wasn't just the military powers or the ruling councils who were terrified. It was every species, every race, every colony that had once felt safe in their corners of space. The humans were no longer just a threat on the fringes. They were a force that had already begun to reshape the balance of power across the stars, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The first real response from the galaxy came when the larger empires, those with the most power, the most resources, realized that they could no longer stand alone. The fear of the humans' unstoppable might force the greatest military forces in the galaxy to set aside their rivalries and grudges. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's oldest and strongest empires decided to form an alliance. They called it the Galactic Coalition, and its sole purpose was to stop the human threat before it could consume them all. At the head of this alliance was the mighty Droska Federation, one of the most technologically advanced and politically powerful species in the galaxy. The Federation's fleets were vast, its warships armed with some of the most devastating weapons known to the universe. Joining them were the mighty Kalar warlords, known for their fierce combat skills, and the Xthorian Empire, whose vast numbers and military expertise had won them countless battles. The coalition was powerful, and it was united for the first time in history, all with one goal in mind: to defeat the humans. But the formation of the coalition didn't bring comfort. It didn't bring the certainty that they could win. Instead, it was a desperate reaction, an admission that they were no longer in control of their own fate. For every power in the galaxy, this alliance was not a show of strength. It was a show of fear. The Galactic Coalition immediately began to gather intelligence. They sent out spies, scouts, and ships to learn everything they could about the humans. Every scrap of information was valuable. They had to understand how the humans fought, what technology they used, how their fleets operated. And most importantly, they had to figure out why the humans didn't take prisoners. The first breakthrough came from a Xthorian scout ship that managed to observe a human fleet from a distance. What they saw made their blood run cold. The humans were not like any other force the galaxy had ever faced. Their tactics were strange, almost instinctual. They didn't make long, drawn-out attacks. They struck quickly with deadly precision. They didn't waste time negotiating. They didn't try to break their enemies. They simply erased them. Their ships moved like predators in the dark, always one step ahead. The more the coalition learned, the more they realized that there was no weakness in the human strategy. They were relentless, and their technology, though simple in appearance, was far more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever encountered. The humans were not just strong, they were adaptable. They changed their tactics on the fly, and every new challenge seemed to make them more dangerous. The coalition's top generals began to speak in hushed tones, as though afraid to say what they were all thinking. What if the humans couldn't be beaten? The galaxy's largest fleets, the most formidable forces the universe had ever seen, began to gather. The coalition put all its resources into one massive, coordinated strike, a blow that they hoped would be powerful enough to end the human threat once and for all. But there was still one problem they couldn't solve. How do you fight a force that doesn't follow the rules of war? The humans weren't interested in strategy. They weren't interested in honor. They didn't care about treaties or conventions. All they cared about was victory, and they didn't need to take prisoners to achieve it. As the fleets of the Galactic Coalition assembled, their leaders met in a secret council to discuss their plan of attack. They knew the humans would not hesitate to strike first, and they needed to be ready for the worst. The discussion was filled with fear and uncertainty. No one knew how to engage the humans in battle. No one knew where to start. But one thing was certain: they had to destroy the humans before the humans destroyed them. Meanwhile, the humans remained silent. Their ships moved through the galaxy like shadows, always watching, always waiting. They were not rushing to attack. They didn't need to. They knew that time was on their side. The galaxy's fear of them was growing by the day, and soon it would be too late for anyone to stop them. As the Galactic Coalition prepared for what would be the largest battle the galaxy had ever seen, the humans watched from the shadows, knowing that the only thing they needed to do was strike when the time was right. The tension was unbearable. The galaxy's greatest minds had come together, but they still didn't understand what the humans were truly capable of. They had underestimated them before, and now they were afraid that they had made a fatal mistake. There was no plan, no strategy that could guarantee victory. All they could do now was wait and hope that they could hold the line long enough to turn the tide. But deep down, everyone knew that hope alone wouldn't be enough. The humans had already proven that they didn't need anyone's help to win, and the galaxy was about to find out just how true that was. The human doctrine. The formation of the Galactic Coalition was the galaxy's last hope. Leaders from every major empire, every powerful species, came together to form a united front. They pooled their resources, combined their fleets, and shared their intelligence in an effort to find a way to defeat the humans. They believed that through strength in numbers, through sheer might, they could stand against this new threat. But as the days passed, and the plans began to take shape, one fundamental truth began to emerge. The humans weren't playing by any of the old rules of war. It wasn't just that the humans were strong, or that their technology was advanced. It was something deeper, something that sent a chill down the spines of the coalition's leaders. The humans didn't seem to care about traditional battle tactics. They weren't fighting to win territory, or to gain power, or even to make a name for themselves. They fought for one reason, and one reason only: to destroy. The reports coming in from scouts and spies only confirmed what many had feared. The humans didn't take prisoners. They didn't offer mercy. Their fleets didn't go for long, drawn-out battles. They struck hard, fast, and with deadly precision. It wasn't a war. They didn't want to fight. They wanted to erase their enemies. As the coalition's leaders began to discuss their strategy, they realized that the humans' most terrifying weapon wasn't just their ships or their soldiers. It was their doctrine, the brutal code by which they fought. Humans didn't leave any room for mistakes, any chance for escape. Every enemy was either completely destroyed or forgotten. "I've been studying their tactics," General Vorlak of the Krallos Dominion said one day, his voice grim. "Every encounter we've had, every report we've received. It's all the same. The humans destroy their enemies in an instant. They don't stop. They don't negotiate. They don't leave anyone alive. There are no survivors, no captives, just death. The room fell silent. The leaders of the coalition exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't a war they had ever fought before. There were no strategies, no back and forth, no playing for time. The humans' doctrine was simple. No mercy, no prisoners, only victory. One by one, the members of the coalition began to realize what they were truly facing. The humans didn't need a reason to fight. They didn't need a cause. They didn't care about honor, treaties, or territorial disputes. The humans fought for one reason only: to win. And in their world, there were no half measures. You either won, or you were erased from existence. "What do we do?" asked Counselor Salas, his voice shaking. "If they don't follow any rules, if they don't care about prisoners or mercy, how do we even begin to stop them?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The galaxy's greatest minds could find no solution. They had faced other empires, other species that fought for power, for territory, or for survival. But the humans weren't interested in those things. They weren't interested in anything other than total victory, and they didn't need to follow any rules to achieve it. The more the coalition studied the humans, the more they understood that they had underestimated them from the start. The humans didn't fight for pride. They didn't fight for conquest. They fought for one reason alone: to prove that no enemy could ever survive a war with them. "They don't leave prisoners," General Vorlak continued, his voice dark. "They don't even leave a trace. They don't want to humiliate their enemies or to send a message. They just destroy." This revelation was more terrifying than any weapon, more terrifying than any battle. The humans weren't interested in war in the traditional sense. They didn't want to fight for any cause. The only thing they cared about was total annihilation, and with their ruthless efficiency and advanced tactics, they could achieve that goal every time. As the coalition tried to form their plans, another chilling realization came to light. The humans weren't just unbeatable. They were unstoppable. Even if the galaxy's greatest fleets could somehow assemble and fight back, there was no chance of survival. The humans had already proven that there was no way to avoid their wrath. No one could outrun them. No one could outthink them. Once the humans decided to erase an enemy, it was already too late. And what was worse, the humans didn't seem to care about anything else. They didn't fight for power, for resources, or for revenge. They fought because they could. They fought because it was their way. The human doctrine, one of total destruction, was a terrifying new reality for the galaxy to face. The coalition's leaders knew that they were now up against something they couldn't fight with traditional strategies. The humans didn't want to negotiate. They didn't want to capture. They didn't want to conquer. They simply wanted to erase every last trace of their enemies from the stars. And that was something the galaxy couldn't stop. Not with their fleets, not with their alliances, and certainly not with their own strategies. The only thing the galaxy could do was prepare for the inevitable, and hope that, somehow, they could survive long enough to avoid the fate that had already claimed so many others. But deep down, everyone knew that there was no escape from the human doctrine, and no one had any idea what was coming next. The final stand. With each passing day, the coalition grew more desperate. They had united the greatest military forces in the galaxy, pooled their resources, and crafted a strategy. Yet every attempt to strike against the humans had failed. The truth had set in. There was no way to match their strength, no way to predict their actions, no way to stop them from simply erasing their enemies from existence. The galaxy's top strategists and generals held secret meetings in darkened rooms, their voices low as they discussed the one option they had left: a final, all-out strike. It would be their last chance to defeat the humans, or at the very least, to slow them down. But even as they prepared their forces, doubts crept into their minds. The humans had already proven time and again that there was no stopping them once they decided to act. But the coalition had no choice. They had no other option but to strike. They believed that their combined strength could overwhelm the humans, that perhaps with sheer numbers they could finally bring down this unstoppable force. Every race, every empire, every species that had ever faced the humans had been wiped out in days, sometimes hours. But this time, the coalition would be ready. The plan was set. The fleet would be massive, larger than any force the galaxy had ever seen. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon would be part of this last-ditch effort. The combined might of the Droska Federation, the Kalar warlords, and the Xthorian Empire would descend on the humans' known territories. This was their final chance to show the galaxy they weren't weak, to show that even the humans could be defeated. The operation was given a simple name, the Last Hope. The idea was simple in theory. Strike first, strike fast, and leave no room for the humans to retaliate. It was a desperate plan, one based on the assumption that the humans could be caught off guard, that they could be overwhelmed by the sheer size and force of the coalition. But the humans had already proven that they were always one step ahead. As the coalition's forces gathered in the outer rim of human space, they waited for the signal to strike. For the first time, there was an eerie sense of hope among the leaders, as though this time, this battle, could finally end the human threat. But it wasn't long before the first reports started coming in. Human ships had already been spotted on the edges of the fleet's formation. The coalition scouts hadn't seen them come in. They hadn't seen anything at all. The human ships moved with the stealth and precision they were known for, slipping past the coalition's defenses without a single shot being fired. They were in position before anyone realized it. "Impossible," muttered General Vorlak, who had helped lead the charge. "How did they get past our scouts?" There was no answer. The human fleet had already begun its strike. Within moments, the massive fleet of the coalition was plunged into chaos. The humans didn't wait for a signal or a declaration of war. They didn't engage in a drawn-out battle. They didn't give anyone time to think. They attacked with a force and speed that the galaxy had never seen before. The first wave of coalition ships was obliterated within minutes. No warning, no escape, no mercy. The human fleet didn't hesitate. They didn't need to. Every shot was calculated, every move precise. The coalition's most powerful warships crumbled like paper under the force of the human attack. Their shields were useless, their weapons ineffective. It was as if the humans had studied every flaw in their defenses and were exploiting them without effort. As the battle raged on, it became clear. The humans weren't even trying to win. They were erasing the coalition, one ship at a time. The human fleet didn't break a sweat. There was no struggle, no back and forth. The humans didn't need to fight fair. They didn't need to do anything but erase. Their doctrine was clear. Destroy everything in their path. Leave no survivors. Reports came in from across the battlefield. Entire fleets had been wiped out, vanishing into nothingness in a matter of hours. The coalition's ships, despite their overwhelming numbers, were being reduced to space debris with terrifying efficiency. The leaders of the coalition had no choice but to order retreat, but it was too late. There was nowhere to run. There was no escape. The battle ended as swiftly as it had begun. The human fleet stood victorious, as it always did. And once again, the galaxy was left with only one truth. Humanity did not take prisoners. Their enemies did not survive. And the coalition, the greatest alliance the galaxy had ever seen, had been eradicated. In the aftermath, the few remaining survivors of the coalition, those who had managed to flee, could do nothing but watch as the human fleets claimed victory. There were no celebrations, no cheers, only silence. For the humans, there was no need for a victory parade. There was only the cold, inevitable knowledge that their doctrine had been proven once again. No one who stood against them would ever survive. And so, the final stand had failed. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The humans were not just another species to be feared. They were an unstoppable force, one that would continue to reshape the galaxy in their image. The message was clear, and it was one that would echo across the stars for centuries to come. If you faced the humans, there was no chance of survival, only complete destruction. The ultimate message. The aftermath of the battle left the galaxy in a state of shock. The Coalition, once the most powerful military force in the universe, had been completely obliterated. The few survivors who managed to escape the final stand had scattered, their fleets broken and leaderless. Their hopes of defeating the humans had been crushed in a matter of hours. There was no plan left, no next step, only the grim realization that the humans were unstoppable. Across the galaxy, fear and silence took over. The message the humans had sent was unmistakable. No one was safe. There would be no second chances. The galaxy's greatest powers, who had once ruled the stars with dominance, were now nothing more than whispers in the dark. The humans had come, and they had reshaped the universe in their image. But this new universe was one of fear, one where the human doctrine ruled, and enemies were erased without mercy. And so, the galaxy learned what no one had dared to believe. The humans were not just another species. They were the law of the stars. In the wake of their victory, the humans did not celebrate or boast. They did not hold parades or make speeches. They did not care about titles, or claiming land, or showing off their power. Their message was simple, and it was clear to anyone who was paying attention. The humans did not seek to rule the galaxy. They sought only to win. And for the humans, winning meant total annihilation of their enemies. For those who had survived the wars, the galaxy would never be the same again. The once proud empires were left in ruins, their fleets destroyed, their leaders gone. And what remained? Fragments. Fragments of power, of pride, of hope. All shattered by the simple, brutal doctrine of the humans. No prisoners, no mercy, only destruction. In the wake of the final battle, no more fleets came to challenge the humans. No more forces stood in defiance. The galaxy was left in an uneasy, oppressive silence, where the only remaining question was whether the humans would ever stop. Would they ever rest? Would they ever allow the galaxy to rebuild? The truth was clear now. The humans had come to stay. They had proven themselves stronger, faster, and more efficient than any other species in the galaxy. And in their wake, they left only one truth. If you faced the humans, you would never survive. They didn't care about your reasons for war, your history, or your tactics. The only thing they cared about was one thing: victory. And their way of achieving it was simple: no mercy. In every corner of the galaxy, beings looked to the stars in fear. They no longer worried about wars between themselves. They no longer worried about what other empires would do. What they feared was what the humans would do next. Would they leave them in peace, or would they continue their campaign of complete and utter destruction? And so, the final message was clear. The galaxy learned that humans don't take prisoners because their enemies never survive. The humans had won, and the galaxy would never forget it.